Folks, welcome to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am, of course, your host, Chris White, and these are live conversations. As I like to say, unpredictable, unscripted, and unrehearsed, unscripted, and unpredictable. And I am particularly delighted to welcome this week's guest. He is the Senior Vice President of Global Solution Consulting with ServiceNow. He's responsible for one of the largest pre-sales organizations on the planet, if I can use that term. And as you're going to discover here over the next hour or so, he's incredibly approachable. He loves to talk pre-sales, and he has given us an hour today to have the conversation. Jeff Margolese. Jeff, my friend, welcome. Thank you for being here. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm rather humbled by the introduction. I wish my mom was around so she could, listen to that. She'd be rather proud of her little boy, that's for sure. No, excited to be here. As you said, big fan, proponent of the pre-sales community. Love what you do to try and, really pump up our profession, get us to the front of the seat at the table, so to speak. So anything I can do to help with that, and excited to talk with you and share anything you want. Let's have an open conversation for you and for anybody else that's out there.
Fantastic. We'll call this an AMA. Ask me anything. So, folks, if you're out there, if you do care to, first of all, say hello. We don't see you out there, so if you care to say hello, please feel free to do so. And of course, if you have any questions for Jeff or myself, I'm assuming questions are going to be aimed more at Jeff than me. Please feel free to do so. So, Jeff, I introduced you very briefly as I want to make sure I get this right, the Senior VP of Global Solution Consulting. Do you mind just taking a minute and sharing a little bit about your background, how you got into pre-sales even to begin with?
Sure, yeah. I'll do the background. Quick introduction. So, and I appreciate that. So I'm the SVP over here at ServiceNow. I've been here about 9 years. We've got a team of about 22, maybe 2,300 SCs globally. I'm very fortunate to lead what I consider the best SC team on the planet. We've got some great women and men in here that do the tough job of trying to showcase to our customers all the value proposition. Yeah. From a career standpoint and those kinds of things. I don't want to go back. I'm kind of old. I'm probably older than you, but let's not.
I don't know. I'm going to put us within a couple of years, but we'll save that. We'll save that for later.
Age is just a number, my friend. It's a mindset too sometimes.
Yes, indeed.
So, quick highlights on the career side. I came out of college and was a programmer for about 10 years doing various programming type positions. I loved coding. I don't think I would love it necessarily nowadays. A lot of complexity that goes in there. It used to be a lot more straightforward, but it was in the late 90s time frame, what I like to call the golden age of software, as it was kind of maturing into a much larger industry than where it was much smaller back then, but where it was heading for the likes of today. And I was doing some development work, and the software that I was using, the way it used to be licensed, was per developer. So every once in a while, these two people used to come by our offices to talk about the software, and which was interesting. There was one person who, come to find out later on, she was the sales rep, and then there was this other guy that would come with her, and he was clearly a little bit more technical, and got to know both of them over a period of time. And one day I asked the more technical guy, I was like, hey, what do you do? I asked you questions, that's nice and all, but I like the coding thing, but what do you do? It seems pretty interesting. And he kind of walked me through. Well, come to find out, he was a sales engineer of sorts, the first one that I ever met. And then it just kind of dawned on me. I'm like, well, I love coding, but I like what you do, so I want that job. And I was actually lucky because he went to kind of another company not too far after, made some introductions, and then I happened to know someone that was working at that company, which happened to be a firm named Web Methods, which is now part of Software AG. And that's how I got my first pre-sales job over there. And that's how I got into sales engineering. I don't keep up with him anymore, but the sales rep, I still keep up with her.
Isn't that funny?
Where she works these days.
Yeah.
So
It's amazing. So many of the people, the account executives that I worked with and sales leaders that I worked with as an SE, and I got my first pre-sales job in 2005, but very similar. Like I keep in touch with many of them. What in particular about his job or about what you perceived about his job sounded so enticing to you?
Yeah, so as a as a real technologist, I'll call it, at least back then, I'm kind of a fake one. Let's be clear. These days, I just talk about the software. I don't actually.
You and I, by the way, that resonates with me a great deal.
Oh yeah, and I'm okay with that. That's eventually the transition you make in the leadership side. But what I liked about it was the fact that you still were going to be on the forefront of technology if you were going to work for a software company, as an example, which I really loved. You could tinker and toy and play with it, which I probably loved the most. And then while I love being a programmer, there's one thing I hated about being a programmer. Well, there was two of them. One, back in the day, you had to be like on call, which I didn't really like. And I didn't really love
the pagers.
Oh yeah, I had a pager. Yeah. Oh my God, who didn't have a pager, right? And having to put systems into production, which was fun, but then you had to do all the break fix that sits behind it. And I hated that part. I like parts of it, but you were just like, yeah. And when you became an SC, pre-sales, whatever you want to call it back then, it was, or even now, it was cool because you could code dirty stuff, I like to call it. Like, hey, let me just code something real quick to show it to the customer, get them excited, but I didn't have to worry about production.
Yeah.
And that really appealed to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. And many people have heard me tell this story. I was 15 years into an enterprise architecture consulting career before I got into pre-sales. And I went through a career development program. And the gentleman I was speaking to, and tell me if this resonates with you, he said, Chris, think about a project life cycle, right? Full circle. You have the kind of skills that would be great on the first quarter end of that sales cycle. You're good at ideating, you're good at communicating, you're good at getting people excited. But my suspicion is after the excitement, you start to lose interest. And I said, that is so me. And that's really what we do with sales engineers, right? Is like you said, the dirty coding, show it, get people excited, and then we move on, right?
Yeah, I think I would add, though, I still love, even to today, and I definitely, when I was a frontline SE, I loved the problem solving aspect, and that's what programming really appealed to me as well. It was like puzzles to me. Like, hey, you have this issue, I kind of figured out here's the puzzle, and we deliver it. You still get to do that here, and that's your traditional. Let's do some discovery, find the problem. Hey, I got the solution. I just don't have to implement it. And
Love that. Awesome. Jeff, let me recognize some of the folks that have chimed in. Southern, I hope I'm saying that right. Chris Hickey, Watson Jones. We have Carolyn from Buffalo, Josh from Munis, and Pam from Boston. Folks, nice to see you out there. If there's anybody out there that cares to say hello, please feel free to do so. If you have any questions for Jeff, please feel free to ask. So Jeff, I'm curious, how long were you, quote, an individual contributor before you moved into management? And what was the core or the foundation of that decision to move into management?
Yeah, I'd say it was probably a couple of years before I moved into management, because I was doing a lot of leadership before I became
at
Web Methods. And then, we were growing, things were going well. And I kind of became a team lead of sorts at the beginning, and then it became formalized at the end. I was at Web Methods for maybe, I don't know, like 3.5 years or something like that. I was always sort of predisposed to going into leadership, but you gotta, the time frame was an interesting one. This is post.com bust. The entire, it was like the 01, 02 time frame. Things were kind of rocky in our industry at the time, the world as a whole, I would say. And so to me, it was like, you know what? I don't care about leadership. I don't care about my career from that perspective. I just wanted to have a good path. And so I was like, no, I'll go be an individual contributor. And then, was quite, like I said, predisposed to being in the leadership space. And that's what Web Methods saw pretty quick. And I eventually, moved into running the team that I was a part of at Web Methods. But I only stayed there, like I said, for about 3.5 years, and then made the transition to VMware, which was a small company back in the 2005 timeframe. I joined there as an SE manager for the central US, which was, we had the entire center of the country with 5 employees who were pretty small.
Wow. Yeah.
And then obviously VMware, who actually just and doesn't exist now as of last week, which is interesting. They're
Which
they
crazy.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I had a 10-year run at VMware as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Watson Jones actually mentioned that you two worked together. Was the jump from individual contributor to managing individual contributors more difficult than the jump from managing individual contributors to managing other managers and leaders, or vice versa?
For me, they weren't that hard. Let me go through the 2 pieces there. IC to manager to, directly.
Yeah. Yeah.
First line to second line is the more common term sitting out there. For me, at least, the product that I was selling in the web method space was quite technical. So even as a team lead and as a manager, I had to still be quite technical. I had to know the products. We didn't have a massive staff there. You were doing both. Hey, you're going to lead. You're going to still work with accounts. So while, it was different, I was still a little bit on the borderline of being a super SE, right?
Okay.
Here today, where I work, we have about 300 leaders across our SE orgs. It's pretty
massive organization. Yep.
Yeah, and our SEs that go from IC to manager, a lot of them will tend toward that super SE thing, but we quickly want them to flip into being, no, you're going to help run the bigger business, partner with your sales leadership, coach, mentor, etc. The folks that you've got underneath you. But to be clear, it is the toughest switch in your career trajectory that I have seen. And then the second toughest one is that move from, I'll call it that first to second line. It gets easier, by the way, as it moves on. And the reasons that I see why are the fact that when you're a manager and all of a sudden you've got 4 peers and now you're managing your peers, your value proposition and your self-worth gets into question. You're like, so what do I do now? I mean, my peers, they're like, well, I don't know. What are you going to teach me? You don't have that much experience in leading leaders. You're a little too far away from the account base. You can't do as much there. Your sales leadership is now sitting in this middle management layer typically, and they're even kind of trying to find some self-worth, et cetera. And you go through almost, I'd say, like a bit of this identity crisis to figure out, like, what is it I actually do here? I mean, you don't want to shuffle paper around. And so finding your way amongst that, it can be a little hard and trying for some folks who make that jump from first to second.
Yeah. And just having spent a little bit of time talking with you, I know one of the things that you talked about and talk a lot about is, quote, getting a seat at the table. My guess is that as you move higher in the organization, one of the real value propositions is getting that seat at the table and becoming the voice of the pre-sales organization at that level. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and that's a tough thing to do, right? Again, because of that self-worth value proposition that you don't have to go and create. And it's important to remember that you have to create it. I kind of, when I'm coaching or mentoring both leaders here at our company, and then I do quite a bit of it even in the public realm, we'll call it. And I tell them, like, listen, nobody's going to give it to you. Sales is not going to give it to you. Sales doesn't care half the time. Yeah, they act like your best friend, and it's the work-life marriage and all those kind of fun things. But if you're not going to prove your value proposition to them, I'm telling you, they're just going to go like, hey, just make sure the demos work. Make sure our attrition's low, and can you fix this problem we're having at these 3 customers? Go get on the support calls. That's how they treat you, unless you really go and grab it and say, no. Here's what's going on in our space. Here's what's going on in the industry, the verticals we serve, the product sets that we have, and start talking about go-to-market strategies, campaigns, and selling. You don't want to be a seller per se, but you need to say that, no, I'm with you. I'm in the sales realm, right? And it's really important to prove that value to me.
Earlier, we were talking about a very specific scenario or phase in the growth of ServiceNow where this really came to play. I want to dig in on that. Before I do, Jeff, there's just a few more people to say hello. I mean, we got a lot of people chiming in. Rika, I hope I'm saying that right. Tanner Drake, someone I've met, my colleague, Bill Ballnave, somebody loving your analogy there. Rich Polton, nice to see you. George, Rochelle has been on the show before. We actually got a couple questions for Bob. Bob, I'm going to come back to your questions in just a minute. I want to give Jeff a chance to answer the question that I made. David, Edgar, Chris, good to see you. So Jeff, we were just talking about the importance of getting, quote, a seat at the table. And what are we talking? Really a seat at the executive table where we're actually now helping to steer strategy and direction. And you mentioned the importance of what's happening in the market, what's happening in various industries that we're serving. You were faced with a situation about the time you joined ServiceNow, if I understand correctly, where ServiceNow was evolving from the focus on the IT services world to really a platform play, new business lines, new personas, et cetera. Do you mind sharing why your role in the pre-sales role became such a critical element in that evolution of ServiceNow?
Yeah, well, it was always critical, just to be clear, right? I always say, listen, it was I'm the steward of what came before me, and even the original SE leader still works at ServiceNow. He's actually our chief innovation officer nowadays.
Wow.
Anyways, yeah, when about 9 years ago when I joined, the company was mostly IT service management with a few other little pieces that were connected into that. But the company was about to embark on moving into new spaces, new buying personas in particular, new products that weren't so directly adjacent to what they've been selling for a while, which, nowadays would manifest itself in platform-based, selling, but it was a little early on at the time. And myself and a few others were brought on to really help with that. We weren't just here to, hey, make us a better SE team. They wanted that maybe as well. But they really wanted to help in how do we do multi-product sales while still maintaining this ITSM, as you're mentioning, product set that we've got as our number one product at the time. And so, a couple of us came in, we kind of evaluated things. We said, well, first of all, don't pool the SEs. That's where we started. Said, you've pooled the SEs. I get why you've done that. And we had a lot of resources here, but we said, no, you need to go one-to-one with the sales rep for a couple of reasons. One, if you're going to do multi-product based sales, then the SC in particular, but obviously the sales rep, but the SC needs to understand the customer. In a pooled environment, it's very difficult to do. So let's move them closer to the customer. Two, we need to get that trust going with the sales team, with the SC. And our president of sales at the time kind of questioned that a little bit. And we said, listen, here's the reason why. Do you know who trains your sales reps? And he's like, enablement. I don't know. No, it's your SEs. I said, and the best ones are the ones that are tied one-to-one like that. And they actually train them. I said, SEs love to sponge everything up. They want to learn every product and all that. They'll learn the value propositions, but maybe they're not the best at portraying that at the outset to a customer, but they're really good at portraying it to their sales rep. So we'll help them to train the rep as a byproduct of this symbiotic relationship that we can create. And that clearly helped us to take off. The other thing that happened that I think you're trying to allude to is that we also started doing a lot of specialist selling around here. So we have our account-based, teams, rep and SC, they're all over the world. And back 8-9 years ago, we didn't have any specialty organization living over here. So we started one. And that's because we were trying to sell to new buying personas. One of the things that gets difficult as you grow as a larger software company and you start, selling into adjacent buying personas, you realize your direct account teams are not very good at doing that. And so we started doing that like others, but again, a unique thing. And we still mostly have this today. We have more solution specialist SEs than we do solution sellers. Because they're both the product expert, the vertical expert. It just depends on what we're moving into. And nowadays, perfect example is, so we've got a customer service business that It's over $1 billion in CACV at this point. It's a totally different buying center than our IT side, and that has several hundred specialist SEs living in it today.
Yeah. So you're saying the ITSM message doesn't exactly land with the customer service persona?
It actually does. Let's not get into that. I'm not here to sell ServiceNow. I'll do that later.
So you mentioned a 1-to-1 ratio. That probably strikes some people as hard to believe. And I know you're not quite a 1-to-1, but it's very, very close. It's about a 0.8 to 1.
0.2 depends on the day. Yeah. The way we do is we segment our business into a commercial, enterprise, and sort of strategic account basis. Our commercial teams in general globally are about 2-to-1, so 2 reps for every single SE. But our enterprise and strategic business in general, and for the most part, is 1-to-1 globally.
Yeah. I know for a fact that a lot of the SE leaders that I work with, if they were to suggest to their sales leaders that they should have a 1-to-1 or work towards a 1-to-1 or a 0.82 to 1 ratio, they would be laughed out of the room. What advice would you give to those SE leaders who are trying to lobby for, let's just say they're trying to go from a 1 to 8 down to a 1 to 5, or 1 to 5 down to a 1 to 3?
Yeah. I don't necessarily have the best advice because every situation is a little bit different. And I think it also depends on the kind of products you're selling, the markets that you're serving, et cetera. So this is not a one size fits all. And, and I'll get to answer your question, and I'm well aware of the plethora of riches that we have here at ServiceNow. And I know we're fortunate with that. I don't plan on it changing anytime soon either. Now to your question, first of all, a good, funny anecdotal story around that is that I was talking to one of our VPs of sales who runs one of our countries. Let's just leave it at that. I don't want to state who it actually is. And to this exact thing, he said, listen, when I talk to customers, it's not like they say, I want to talk to more sales reps. They want to talk to more SDs. And that's kind of what it goes to. You need this fine balance, right? You can't have just all sales reps, because eventually the customer base is like, well, I have real questions about it, not the surface style that a lot of reps do, can answer them. And that's not a bash toward sales teams. They got a tough job too. I don't know how to go close deals. I don't know how to reach my hand into the back pocket and grab the money. That's not a skill set that I own. But then, your average sales rep doesn't know how to do solutioning in front of the customer. And that's the thing. If you think about it from a standpoint of, maybe you can increase your revenue significantly by having more SEs. That's the path to go. And what I mean by that, reps are good at, they can be taught, go look for these 3 problems. We have 3 products that solve them. Talk to the customer, say these things. They kind of run scripted environments, and they're pretty good at doing that, right? And that's more, your single, product type selling. But if you're going to do platform selling like we're doing, by the way, we have an environment that's unknown. What I mean by that, the customer doesn't even know they have the problems. Well, it's only SCs that can help go find that. In fact, all kinds of people that we have to use to do that. And so if you have environments or you're selling into areas that are more like that, then to me, that's how you go and talk to the CRO, the CFO, I don't know, whoever's got to go pay for this stuff, and say, listen, we can be, our revenue can go up significantly. Our deal sizes can grow much larger if you have SDs that can come in and architect of sorts the solutions that our customers might want to buy. I think that's one potential path. Again, I can't solve that for everybody per se, but I think that's a good area.
And you mentioned earlier about the way to get the seat at the table, quote unquote, is to really demonstrate your value. And that's how we're going to demonstrate our value, right? Is increasing deal size, right? Potentially helping to open up deals that don't exist. And I'm reminded of something that you and I chatted briefly about, which is there's a term, buyer enablement, which is certainly becoming a very common term discussed in pre-sales circles for understandable reasons, right? There's when you have a very well-defined persona with a very well-defined problem, then I do think that a part of our role is enabling the buyer to make the best decision that they can in the easiest way possible. Now, if your teams are dealing with, let's say, decision makers or executives who they might not even understand that they have a problem, or they might not even understand that there's a new way of doing X, Y, or Z, buyer enablement may not exactly fit that foot. Do you agree with that? And can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. I definitely agree with that. And again, I don't think that's a one size fits all thing. I'm actually quite fascinated of sorts of the buyer enablement movement. Maybe it's a good term to use that's going on out there. Do I think it's a fit for what we're doing here? I don't think so for the majority of our sales, and maybe that's a good place to look and then juxtapose with what I do see as a real benefit to buyer enablement across the rest of the industry. You know, listen, we're elephant hunting for the most part here. We're looking for $100 million deals. I want to curate the entire experience for our customers. In other words, we're willing to invest the physical resources and money to go and do that. And so I don't want to leave it up to chance for someone to do any kind of self-discovery. So that's part of the reasons why we wouldn't probably do most of that. But the other one is more what you're really referring to, which is the fact that a lot of times our customers don't even know they have a problem. They might know, but they're not even looking for a solution, maybe is a better one. And that's because buyer enablement assumes like, oh, I have a problem, I'm looking for a solution, I want to do a lot of self-service, etc. Yeah, we're having to walk in and say, you don't even know that there's a solution out there. You probably don't even know what the actual problem is. We have to do a ton of discovery. And we will go as far as, I mean, we've had opportunities where we'll spend 1,000 hours of SE time building what is almost an MVP type, prototype of sorts to showcase to the customer, here's what our solutions would look like. Again, because it's a platform-based play. So again, in that buyer enablement space, like there's no way we would want to try to do that. Like I want to curate the whole thing. We want to go as high up in the organization as possible to sell at that level because we are trying to, do a fair exchange of value at a very large scale. Again, but by the way, I also think it's pretty fascinating more in the product-led growth space, right? I think that's where a lot of the buyer enablements come from. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. But I will say we have talked recently to our, we do have a digital inside sales team. And we are looking at trying to do some stuff there, but even in that end, like our minimum deal sizes are in the multi-hundreds of thousands. It's pretty hard to do some of that.
Yeah. It's so well said. There's a question from actually a gentleman whose name I mentioned earlier that I think plays into this a little bit, because when I hear you talk about the 1,000 hours that are being put in on, $100 million deal and the curated experiences that your teams are building and delivering, that sounds like a job for a fairly senior, a fairly well-experienced sales engineer, not necessarily someone that is sort of falling into this role for the first time. Steve Bullington runs the onboarding program for Salesforce, and his question is, he's familiar with your early career SE program. What impact has that had on the organization, that program? And is there a certain amount of experience that somebody has to have before they're really involved in those major deals, these curated experiences?
Yeah, so a lot to unpack. Hey, Steve, thanks for the question. So a couple of things there. One, if we're pursuing a Fortune 100 company, the true lead account SE, they're not out of college. Let's be clear. Those are 10, 15, 20-year experience.
Tenured SEs.
Yeah, have probably some industry experience, some vertical industry-based experience, et cetera. Now, when I say the 1,000 hours, it's not that person that's necessarily, they might have very little on it. Now, we do use all kinds of different people. So we have something called a factory as an example. Well, that's actually a lot of recent grads out of our, we call it their SE Academy, that build widgets as an example. They don't directly talk to the customer. They're not an engineering team, but they are in the sales mix to help build out these things to create an MVP. We have a design studio that also has people that do or can come out of our academy as well. And they also aren't as experienced in the art of being a pre-sales person, but they're in and around these. The other thing we might do is we might use people in our demo center who are definitely coming again out of these academy-based things. We might use them for, hey, you know what? We've got campaigns running. We want to get small groups interested at the customer while we're trying to build these big deals to get them into, getting interested in the product sets that we have. So yeah, it's possibilities, but at the highest end, no, these are all highly experienced, IC5, IC6 type individuals that are running these. We have an enterprise architect group that's probably engaged as well. Our design studio, our factory, we got all kinds of different groups that really can get engaged. That we'll back up the truck if it's a big enough customer and opportunity for sure.
Well, and you mentioned to me that you have, I think, upwards of 28 different roles within your pre-sales organization. And as I was listening to you, not only do you have what I would call a curated experience engine, but you have a pre-sales professional factory and engine, right? Where you've got lots of different roles with different responsibilities, and people can rise through the organization and take different paths, right? So you have created a manufacturing engine for the profession and the professionals in the organization as well, is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, in a broad sense, and let's be clear, I didn't create it. There's a lot of people that put a big hand in that. But Steve's example was asking about our SE Academy. We've had to scale that back as the world's changed a little bit. But at its height, even a year ago, we were producing about 120 new SEs per year out of that. And right now, we have it in a nice scaled fashion. We can kind of flex it just based on the demands of our business. And we are, we're still growing. We're still adding SEs. Just as a fun perspective, in 2022, we added 650 net new SEs to the team. We only added maybe 220 or something like that in 2023. And so the strategy right now is to push from the bottom for the most part. We are hiring, younger and career-based individuals. They come into our academy. That's done all over the world. We do it in all our three major geos, so Americas, Europe, and over in APAC. Yeah. We put them in there, depending on time, location, etc. But in about 6 to 8 months, they're ready to come out of the oven, so to speak, and they're freshly minted SEs. And then they can go into work, but we don't restrict where they go. If they're ready and they're ready to be an enterprise SC, we've had a few that are good enough to do that. They go into it. A lot of them end up in our digital teams, our inside teams, our demo center, etc. It just depends on the needs of our business, but it's been quite successful in doing that, and we're continuing with that, as you might imagine, right now. So we like to push from the bottom, so to speak.
Awesome. I mean, it's just so. I find it so insightful just for myself, and I'm sure our listeners, just insightful to hear the organization and the engine that has been, I know, built starting before you and then stewarded by you, as you said, over the last 9 years. It's really impressive. By the way, folks, Jeff, let me just push our pause button. Folks, in case any of you didn't know, I'm speaking with Jeff Margolese. He is the Senior Vice President of Global Solution Consulting for ServiceNow. David made a few comments. Tia, you asked a question that we're going to get to. I think there was another question that I want to get into, but before I do, I think David may have asked a question, but Bob Burkhart, nice to see you, sir. I hope you're still with us. He asked a couple questions. I'm going to jump right to the second one because I find this one particularly interesting. He says, I sense a trend towards more technical, I'm assuming sort of in this role or in this profession. That actually catches me by surprise a little bit. And Bob, I hope I'm representing your question correctly. But in your or from your perspective, Jeff, as you're developing your teams, as you're attracting candidates, is it the technical skills that you're looking for? Is it the business skills? Is it just in sort of an equal parts mix of both and some other things?
It ends up being both. It all, as you mentioned, we have 28 different SC roles. So it depends on which ones we're hiring for. For example, I'm going to self-promote for a second. We have quite a few AI positions open right now across the world. If anybody's got any AI experience, we are definitely hiring in our pre-sales team. And there's a perfect example. Like, you're going to have to be pretty decently technical to take that on. We're not hiring necessarily a data scientist, but we would take one of those. But we don't just need the technical experience. It's the other pieces that you had in there. And it's that, confluence of, I said this to somebody the other day, think of it as a triangle. You have the technology piece, you have sort of this sales acumen piece, and then this interpersonal piece. And we're always looking for all three. Luckily, in general, with our platform, it's not the most complicated product out there. So we believe anybody, can pick it up. The people that have the predisposition to technology and all that, you got to love technology. Don't get into this career if you don't love technology, right? But you have to have the propensity to want to learn and be able to do that. And then that confluence, hey, doing some self-discovery, be inquisitive, ask lots of questions, be curious is a term.
Curiosity.
Anybody on my team is on here, they know I've said that 1,000 times at this point. We should have bumper stickers at this. And I think when you're looking for those, we're always looking for all three, to be honest with you. Some might lean one way or the other. If you're hiring for, an account SC to run AT&T, well, technical is good, but we're probably going to need someone with a little bit more, value businessy side rather than just the pure technology, because we're going to give you 25 other specialists to work with you.
Yeah. And maybe even somebody with some telecom background, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, because to me, technical expertise can also come in the form of industry expertise or domain expertise or something of that nature, right? And I agree with you. I call it the three-legged stool. There has to be some level of technical expertise. There has to be some level of what I would call interpersonal skills, right? High IQ, curiosity, the ability to communicate, and then sales skills, right? And I know for me, when I made the switch from consultant to pre-sales, I had two of the three. I was an expert in my field, enterprise architecture. I was very interpersonal. I was good at speaking and presenting. I didn't know a thing about sales.
Yep.
I didn't understand sales, right? So that's ultimately why I wrote the book, because when I first started out, I was a disaster and I figured things out. And then when I took over a team, I realized that they were making all the mistakes that I had made when I first got into the profession, and they needed some training. So to me, that's sort of the three-legged stool. And it sounds like we're saying some very similar things. Yep. So fabulous. There was another question that came in from David, and it's I'll roll this question up just a level. Having been an individual contributor and leader, how would you suggest getting past, quote, recruiter for consideration as pre-sales again? And I'm going to just maybe take that up just a half a level. If there are people out there that maybe are looking to either break into pre-sales or level up, do you have any words of advice for those people if they find themselves sort of running into some sort of barrier or walls?
Well, I mean, differentiation, especially these days, is key, right? Now, how you do that obviously is going to be dependent on the kind of company you're trying to get into, the roles you're after, et cetera. But again, differentiation is key. You got a lot of hot topics sitting out there in the world, AI being by far and away the biggest one, and leaning into pieces of that and what might be attractive to any company that might be looking to hire you is pretty important. I think, to the question around, I assume the question is kind of around, I used to be an individual contributor. I went into management, but now I'm thinking I might go back to being an individual contributor. I never look at that as being an issue. Even for my own career, I took a few steps back, so to speak, and said, you know what? I mean, I really want to do this role, or I want to get into this company, right? They could come in both forms. And I'll just take the role that you have. I'm okay with that. By the way, set your expectations on that. If you were getting paid at some senior director level and you want to now go and be a senior SC, they might pay you a little bit differently. Like that's, just kind of life around that. But sometimes you gotta, take a step back to get 10 steps forward all at the same time too. The individuals will have to figure out what that looks like. But, we wouldn't evaluate that as an example as being, a detractor from why you may or may not hire somebody. But, listen, it's still a networked world. Make connections. That's a tried and true thing. I don't care what anybody thinks about as far as social media and all the other things that sit in between it. Connections are super important. That's even for me. I never stop with the connection things. And I think it's important for people to continue to do that. Ask questions and then, do your homework, do your research, like showcase that you've actually done that, and it can help you go a long way.
Amen. Amen. Well, the interesting thing is that it's the same skills, or the same skills that help you get a job are the same skills that are going to help you actually sell the solutions that you sell, right?
Do
your homework.
Planet, right?
What's that?
You're selling the best product on the planet. That's this guy. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. And if you can't sell yourself, and it's interesting, I have a number of people reach out to me and say, Chris, can you just give me some advice? I'm going to an interview. And so the first thing I always say is, however you sell yourself is how they're going to assume you will sell and represent them to one of their customers. So keep that in mind. They are making note of that. So absolutely. Tia Joseph has brought up a very good question pertaining to diversity. She said, she mentioned the pool is not very diverse because the challenges that tech has had the past couple of decades. How do you ensure these top Fortune 100 customers work with a diverse team? Jeff, I'll either invite you to attempt to answer her question directly, or just answer a broader question, which is what is an example of some of the things that ServiceNow is doing to ensure as diverse a workforce, particularly in your organization, as possible?
Yeah, no, I'll actually do both of them. And it's always a challenge, as Tia's even kind of pointing out there. But I will say, clearly I can't go and fix the history in the past, but we're not so hung up on SC experience. I didn't state that. Now, again, hiring out of college to go take on AT&T, just a good reference point because it's just such a big company. It's not going to work. You're just going to struggle with that environment. But we have gone into the market and hired practitioners, as an example, with lots of experience. They might not have SC experience, but we will hire them with lots of practitioner experience. You might come from a consulting company. You might have worked at AT&T. I got to be careful. We don't want to go too far. We don't want to hire customers, employees too often.
Right.
And so that is one of the ways you can get some of that diverse experience at the top of it. Okay. But it's a struggle somewhat, as Tia's mentioned there. Now, what are we doing more broadly with that? As I mentioned, and you were kind of asking some questions about our SC Academy. And to me, that is the best way that we can put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, around saying, hey, we're really behind trying to, somewhat change our industry, the world, dare I say. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. And if you looked into our academy, about 50 to 55% of it is a fairly diverse mix, whether that's female, minority, etc. We try to target that specifically.
Love that.
Say, okay, let's go and find that. I mean, we even went as far as it was last year, early on in the year, we did an academy program just for veterans, as an example. So we targeted the veteran community, who tended to be older, by the way. They weren't your typical 22-year-olds out of college. No. They were significantly older because we had a lot of need in our U.S. Fed team. And we said, hey, this is a perfect way to get what we need and then help into a diverse community all at the same time, too.
Yeah, yeah. So what I hear you saying is you're very intentional about what I would call filling your employee pipeline with a diverse group of candidates, starting from the very beginning in your new career, early career development program. And ideally, that's just going to filter upwards.
Yeah, because otherwise, the problem you get with our industry as a whole is that us and all the other, let's say the top 10 other big companies, we're just going to trade amongst each other. Is that really okay? Our numbers will look good, but your numbers will look bad. Okay, I guess that makes us feel good in the short term, and it can help in certain respects that you can attract in younger talent when you have a more of a diverse based environment. But I don't think that's really fixing the problem. Now, you want to get into how do you really fix those problems? You're going to have to go back to grade 3 or grade 4 English, or probably math classes, etc., and start changing society around that. That's probably a topic for a different time.
And yes, that's probably certainly it's above my technical pay grade on that conversation. But I'm glad, Tia. Thank you for the question. I think it's an important question to raise. Jeff, I'm going to push our pause button just one more time, folks. I'm speaking to Jeff Margolese. He is the Senior Vice President of Global Solution Consulting with ServiceNow, responsible for one of the largest pre-sales organizations on the planet. Believe it or not, Jeff, we've been at this for about 45 minutes. We are going to land the plane here are you good until 12 o'clock Central? Okay. And we will end at that time. I want to be respectful of your time. We have a few more questions online, and then I've got a few more questions from you. First of all, folks, I just want to thank you for all the comments, the questions, the chat has been blowing up. So appreciate that a great deal. There was a question from Scott Taylor. He said, 18-year medical background, some coding background. Any actionable tips I can do to prepare for a transition to being a sales engineer? I think we've touched on a few things, but when you hear that, anything specific come to mind for you, Jeff?
It's so funny that he asked the question. So I do an all hands every quarter, and which actually we're going to do ours in I think next week is our Q4 one. So our Q3 one, I happened to be on a world tour, and I was over in Copenhagen, and so I broadcast it from our Copenhagen office. And I was trying to highlight some individual SE from around the world, that might have some kind of interesting story. And it just so happens that one of our academy grads, who now is I think she was a commercial SE at this point, in our Copenhagen office was a nurse before she became an SE.
Interesting.
So maybe a little along these lines. And the reason I bring that up is she leaned into that. She didn't have the deepest tech background. Remember one of my statements before, you better love technology. Don't get into this profession if you're not going to love technology. It's just not going to work, right? You don't have to be, Bill Gates or anything like that, or, go found some software company or whatever it is. But you're going to have to love technology. And if you're predisposed to that, your industry experience is a real benefit, at least the companies like ours, where we're like, hey, you know what? Because by the way, we sell to a lot of healthcare organizations. We've got to go into the hospital and say, how are we going to make the nurse's life better? How are we going to make the doctors more efficient? The patient's onboarding or whatever it is better? Well, having some kind of understanding is a big benefit, and that's what we highlighted when I did the all hands with this SC, where we said, hey, and we asked her, like, how did you do this transition? And some of it was like, she said, well, like with our own software, we have the ability, we let people train online for free. She's like, oh, I just went and did the training and learned how to do it. And
that's awesome.
So go learn. That's for one, and lean into what is it the industry. You mentioned medical. I don't know which particular piece of it. How can technology help those environments? That'll be attractive to some companies out there.
Amen. People come to me and ask me this question a lot, and I say precisely what you just said, which is you may not be an expert in XYZ product, software, technology, but you've got 18 years of experience. You've become an expert in your field. There's no one more qualified to talk to the prospects that A, B, or C organization is calling on than someone like yourself. So it's instant credibility. So love that. All right, we'll take one more question for the field, and then I have one more question. Actually, we're going to do it in reverse order. You just mentioned that you did your quarterly call from Copenhagen, if I heard you correctly. And I happened to notice a few photos on LinkedIn over a period of about, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks where you were in a different location. Seems like you did a world tour. Am I correct in that?
That is correct. I am fortunate that ServiceNow encourages me to get out there and get past the 4 walls of my house or our local office here. So I did a tour. My wife actually came with me, and we did 5 weeks. We did Copenhagen, Munich, Zurich, London, Dublin, and then I passed through Dallas on my way to Tokyo for
super
the final stop on the way.
Fabulous. Well, I'll spare asking what was your favorite beer in each one of those stops. That's a different podcast, I think. But I am curious, were there notable either differences that you observed working and speaking with those teams, and or were there notable common similarities or patterns that really struck a chord with you?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to answer the beer question really quickly because I did stop in Munich during Oktoberfest.
Yes.
Yeah. We did an event at Oktoberfest, which is epic.
Oh, that's awesome.
Everybody go to do that. Now, beyond that, like we'll do the fun comparative of sort of the Nordics and Central Europe, the German, Swiss kind of areas versus like the US is a good example. Listen, what SEs do is what SEs do. It's do some discovery, it's do some fit, etc. Those are pretty much the same in our solutions. That's luckily are quite horizontal. They fit in with most countries. Now, because of what we sell, which is a lot of operational efficiency. If you go into a country where they have low cost of labor, our value proposition starts to change, because you can't say like, oh, we're going to make your employees so much more efficient, it'll save $100 million. And we're like, yeah, but we pay our employees, $3 an hour. So why is that interesting to us? You do have to be careful of that. And so that is one thing that does happen. Some countries, as an example, due to labor costs and their economies, et cetera, some of your solution sets just aren't as, interesting to them. Now, the more, I think, interesting piece is that in general, over in Europe versus the US, here's kind of an interesting one. In the US, you can go into a customer, find their problem, okay, show them a little solution, talk about it real quick, and quite often an American company will make a pretty quick decision and say, yeah, I'm going to buy it. We have a lot more, we're much more risk, we're not risk averse, we'll take more risk here in the US in general. Okay.
Yeah. It's sort of the cowboy mentality, right? Like that's just us.
Exactly. Sort of that cowboy mentality. But we also make a little more mistakes. All right. But I think that's built into the business models here. Like, hey, if it doesn't work out, we'll just chuck it away. No big deal. Nothing gained, nothing lost, or whatever the common sentiment is there. Over in Europe, and again, in general, it doesn't mean that everybody's doing this. They will take a lot more time to understand, like, tell me more about the solution. I want to get into the engineering aspects of it. What's the deep value proposition of it? And they'll do a lot more analysis. In other words, they will typically elongate the sales cycle. But typically their outcomes, they don't make as many, sort of mistakes with this thing, but then they don't take as much risk either. And so we shift the way we do our sales environments in one versus the other, because in Europe, they want to go deep typically on what is the product, how does it work, what's my deep proposition, do you have a local reference, is it in my industry, etc. You'll see some of that in the US, but they'll be much quicker with it, and they'll go like AI is the perfect one. You're seeing right now some American companies just go, yeah, just give it to me. Like,
yeah, just go do it.
Yeah, no, give it to me. I'm ready. I want to do it. I want to be leading edge. European ones are like, well, I want to hear about it. Can we get into, I want to do a POC. Can we go deeper with it? Like, oh, okay, we can do that too.
Yeah. So they're a little bit more scrutinizing with how they make decisions. Is that sort of a fair way to put it?
Yep.
And so as a result, the SEs, maybe they've got a little more work to do.
Oh yeah.
To get that to get that prospect completely bought in and convinced.
Dare I say that some of them even might have to be a little bit more technical, because the customer's going to probably want to go into the weeds a little deeper than you would see in some US companies. Again, these are generalizations between the two. You can see it different.
Yeah.
sides of
Yeah, I love it. And I've had the opportunity to do training. In fact, I'm humbled by the opportunities I've had to work with people in Australia, in Asia, in Europe, and it's similar. There are some very common patterns, and then there's some very stark differences, particularly sort of in the business culture, right? So I think that's a fascinating opportunity. You've mentioned AI a couple times. This was the last question. Barry Ross, Barry, nice to see you, sir, from Proverity. He asked this question. Can you share some examples of how your team is using AI and or chat GPT, if at all? Is this something that you all and your organization is starting to adopt and embrace in their business execution?
We're doing a couple things in that space right now. For one, we sell an AI product, so they're all deep and well versed into to doing that. But that's a different conversation. We don't have anything formal per se. Now we did launch internally a sort of a sales assist that's got an AI based background, which is pretty phenomenal because it can go and scour our entire knowledge base and find out questions like, oh, what's the licensing for this thing, or who's using that, etc. So that, which is a pretty common use case, I think, that a lot of organizations are doing. Individual account teams, and we've done some fun training with some of the account teams. You notice I say account teams. I don't really think that the rep or the SC are really using it differently. Now what's probably happening, the rep thinks of something and the SC says, oh, I don't know, let me go try chat GPT. We'll get some data. And then they riff on it. But we're using it to do that traditional in the last 5 months, go look up a 10K, summarize it. What's the issues that the customer's seeing? Not that dissimilar in those respects today. I don't think we're doing anything that others haven't, and we don't have anything necessarily formal over here today as far as AI and ChatGPT from a how does an SE make their lives better. Like I said, luckily we're one of the first to market, and we have sold a decent amount of generative AI capabilities, but that's excellent discussion.
Yeah. And the sort of the promotion you made for people with AI background looking for work, that would be to help work with those teams selling your AI. That's what I suspected, but I figured I'd call attention to that. Yeah. One final question that I'll handle real quick that comes from Maria Pavlovich. I hope I'm saying that right. Can you share which approach on the skill development and training you find valuable for your SE team members? Well, I'll just make a plug for the 6 Habits book that's on the wall over my shoulder, and the training that we offer, Maria. So if you care to circle back with us, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. Jeff, we have just about overstayed our welcome. So I want to, the landing gear is out, the runway is in sight. We're going to land the plane. Any closing or final comments from you, sir, as we put a bow on today's conversation?
Well, first, Chris, I'll start with I appreciate you having me, and thanks for all that you do for the profession. And just so you know, and for anybody here in the public realm, I love referring to it as a profession. One of my stated goals, and I actually just had my quarterly growth conversation this morning with my boss. It was quick, just to be clear. And but one of my stated goals is that someday to see a university, a college, somewhere have an actual program geared directly toward, we'll use the broad term of pre-sales. Still have yet to see that. I think we're actually making a lot of headway because it's such a great profession. We talked about my own career development and, my path to getting here, which is probably not that different from many others out there. And I think it's such a great profession. What we can do to promote it is a fantastic thing. I'll end with anybody has questions, comments, etc. My virtual door is open. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active out there. I'm no Chris White, but I try to live up to the dual billing. But no, I appreciate you having me. It's been fun for sure. I hope people got something out of it.
Well, I'm quite certain they did, Jeff, and I cannot say thank you strongly enough. It's really been a delight to just wax poetic a little bit and hear some of your thoughts and observations. I'm going to invite you to hang around backstage just for a moment. I'll send you away with a parting gift. In the meantime, folks, thank you all so much. For those of you who were joining us, who joined us live, really appreciate all the questions, all the comments. I know, I am quite certain you got something, if not quite a few things out of this conversation. If you like these, I encourage you to follow hashtag Tech Sales Advice. And of course, you can go to techsalesadvisors.com to learn more about me and my organization. In the meantime, Jeff, thank you so much, sir. It's been a pleasure. Hang around just for a minute. To everyone else, have a good week. We'll see you next week. Thanks all. Bye-bye.